welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host and a child of an all-powerful, perfectly loving God, and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. I'm grateful to be the host of Rico 12, and Rico 12 is an open to all addictions and afflictions organization dedicated to exploring the common threads of the differing manifestations of alcoholism, sharing tools and hope from those walking a similar path. So, whether your thing is alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, food, whatever, you are home here. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and locations to learn from and support one another. Our speakers come from various fellowships and experiences, demonstrating the universal principalities of recovery. Rico 12 is not allied or affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. This is Rico 12 meeting number 430. We've been doing this every Friday for a long time. I'm grateful to have you guys here. Thank you for joining us live or on the recording later. Today's speaker is David G., and he'll be wrapping up the 12-week series on each of the 12 steps of recovery this week by speaking on step 12. And I look forward to diving into this conversation here in a few minutes. But first, a few quick announcements. First, our Afro Euro Rico 12 that has been recording at 8 a.m. UK time for a few years now, starting next Friday, May 1st, 2026, they will change that, and it'll be a live recording at noon UK time on Fridays, every Friday. That makes it 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. in South Africa and in Israel. So hopefully that's a little bit more convenient for those of you out there, and for any speakers in that time zone who would love to do that, reach out. We'll get you connected. Lisa S. is doing an amazing job getting great speakers for this time, and this time we'll make things more available to those people there. So, and even here in the U.S. And the North American continent. All right, a little bit more. Rico 12 offers a variety of recovery resources, including social media communities, podcasts, website. To explore more, go check out rico12.com. That's RECO12.com. And check that out, and we'll and join us. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue this mission. For information on how to do that, I'll put stuff in the chat. You can also go to rico12.com/support. Thank you this last week to Jade, Lisa, and Callie for your generous donations. Any support, both financially and especially by word of mouth, truly makes a difference in helping us share these messages of hope and recovery. Each week, we receive light and inspiration from our speakers. Their experience brings hope, meaning, worth, and growth to us as listeners. Now I'm going to welcome today's guest speaker, David G., read just a little bit about him, and then turn the floor over to him. David G. is a recovered alcoholic addict from Oklahoma in the USA. He is a repeat guest on Rico 12, first appearing on episodes 80, 96, and 298, and here we are on episode 430. He's also a co-panelist on Rico 12's Big Book Roundtable that releases every Thursday on every podcast platform out there with Nikki M and me, Justin B. David has helped countless thousands of members from all fellowships, backgrounds, and walks of life to recover from a hopeless state of mind through the 12 steps as laid out in the Big Book. Speaking all over the U.S. and across the world by Zoom, many of his Big Book studies and talks can be found on YouTube and Spotify. Today and every day since August 8th, 1994, there is one thing that has never changed: the absolute certainty that God has entered into his heart and continues to live in a way which is indeed miraculous. Take it away, David. The floor is yours.
All right, Justin, thank you so much for having me here. And thank you, everybody, for coming out. My name is David Green. I am an alcoholic and addict of many sorts. And as Justin just said, I've been given the gift of recovery since August 8th, 1994. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I'm super happy to be here. I always love coming to Rico 12. I love hearing the speakers that Justin lines up for Rico 12. And I just love being a part of the Big Book Roundtable with my good friend and my sister, Nikki M, Justin B. We've been doing this for a long time. We took a little break there for a while due to family issues and things that was going on in life. But we were able to come back together just a short time ago, and we're finishing up the rest of the Big Book up to page 164. So if you haven't had a chance to check any of that out, please do. Also, a lot of my talks, as Justin had already mentioned, Big Book studies can be found on YouTube and Spotify. And I'm just so blessed. I am so grateful to be here today, because where I came from, when I came here in 1994, I was a very, very, very broken man. I had no idea where life was going. There was only one place left for me to go, and that was back to prison for the rest of my life. And I knew that's what was going to happen without a spiritual awakening. So I'm grateful to have been asked to speak on Step 12 today. And I love the series you had each week. You had a different speaker. You had a lot of great speakers, many of them that I know, some of them I sponsor. And as each one of them spoke on the step, I just knew that it's because of one alcoholic, one addict carrying the message to another that we're able to recover by the grace of a kind and a loving God. So today, if you have your big book and you want to open up to page 89 with me, I'm not going to do a ton of reading. I just want to share a couple of paragraphs and my experience, strength, and hope around that. And then we'll just kind of move from there, with my experience and see where God leads us. So, for me, chapter 7 says working with others, not working on others. And I hear people say that a lot sometimes. Oh, I'm working on a new prospect. Well, let me know how that goes, because that's not what our book says at all. It says that we're working with others. And, we have to be careful. I know at least I do, because I can get into the mindset that this is more about me than it is about the loving God that I'm carrying the message for. And unconsciously, I don't even really know I'm doing this until something happens in my life and I look back and think, oh crap, that really wasn't about God. That was about me. So, there's so many things that I've learned working with others. So it's definitely working with others, not working on others. And when I look at the 12th step, I like to look at it and break it down in three different areas. I want to look at the promise, I want to look at the charge, and I want to look at the challenge. And what does that look like? So the promise is having had a spiritual awakening. That's why we're here. I don't know about you. I'm not here for sociability, although that is a part of it. I'm not here for just for brotherhood, although that is a part of it. I'm here to have a spiritual awakening as a result of the work is outlined from the doctor's opinion to chapter 6. If I do exactly what the work tells me to do, it promises me that I will have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. Then I will have a message to carry to others. A lot of times I run into people that have trouble sponsoring others. They'll call me and they'll say, you seem to you be pretty successful with that. Tell me what it is you do. And one of the things that I do is what was done with me. I will go to page 90 in the interview process. There's an interview process there. If you listen to our RICO 12 studies or any of my big book studies, you'll see that there's a process there. There's questions that we ask. There's things that we do. We get to know the person before we just jump up and begin to sponsor them. Once they do that, I like to take them to steps 10, 11 right away, teach them how to watch their thoughts, how to turn to God, how to discuss that with somebody else, how to make amends quickly if they've done any harm, and then to turn their thoughts to someone they can help. If they can help someone, that's great, but the book's not asking that. It's asking us to turn our thoughts. That's the practice of step 10 daily. I also start them right away with looking at nightly review and on awakening. I like to look at two-way prayer. I like to look at how two-way prayer has worked for those before us and those of us that are practicing it now. So the promise, having had a spiritual awakening, again, is covered in the doctor's opinion all the way to the end of chapter 6. And if I will do that work as laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the promise is I will have a spiritual awakening as a result of that. Now, the charge, remember I said I look at it in three areas: the promise, the charge, the challenge. We looked at the promise. Here's the charge. The charge is to carry this message to other alcoholics or addicts and to show you how to have a spiritual awakening and how to connect to God. Now, if we look at the spiritual experience that's in the back of the book, in order for me to have one of these things, I need to kind of get an idea of what it looks like before I even begin to set out to see if that is really what I want. Because I don't know about you, but I was kind of scared of any of that kind of stuff that came with God. And it was due to the way that I had been brought up in different places like church. But when we look at the spiritual experience in the back of the book, it begins to talk about a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. It talks about personality changes or religious experience, spectacular upheavals, um, it looks at revolutionary changes. And I can tell you, by and large, the man that I was before I went through this work and the man that I am today as a result of going through that work is not the same man. The man that took the first 5 steps is not the same man that took the last 7. A new man emerged. And as a result, now I have a message to carry. And I do that through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sit down, I begin to read with people through the big book. And it's not because I don't think they know how to read or they're not intelligent enough to do it. But one thing that I do know, if you're trying to read the book with the same mindset that puts you to sleep to need to read the book in the first place, then you probably need a second set of eyes on that deal. I know I did. Now, at 25 years sober, I hit an emotional bottom in Alcoholics Anonymous that damn near took me back to the drink. I was hiding a lot of secrets. I'd got involved in lust and acting out and the behaviors. And, I was just dying on the vine from that. I got caught up in that trap and I just could not get loose. And as a result of that, burying secrets, the problem is we always bury them alive. And that's exactly what happened. They begin to come back to life. They begin to manifest. They begin to show their face. And as a result, I was exposed for the behavior that I was living by. And at that time, I came back by the grace of God. I met a man that took me back through the work as outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was one of the things that he did. He read the book. Now, I was offended by that because I didn't think I needed anybody reading the book to me. I had Charlie of Joe and Charlie as an early mentor. He was one of my first sponsors. I absolutely did not need anybody to read the book to me, so I thought. But as a result of doing that, I began to see how the self, the ideas, the concepts, the beliefs, the attitudes, the notions, these were the things that had defeated me. See, if alcohol is my problem, I say this all the time, I need not to drink alcohol and there shouldn't be any more problem. Same way with drugs, same way with lust and acting out, same way with food, same way with gambling. If that's the problem, just don't do it. But what happens is when I quit doing that, I begin to suffer from a condition of mind that shows up fearful. It shows up angry. It shows up resentful. It shows up shameful. It shows up remorseful. I don't know what to do with any of that because I haven't had an experience through the steps. And I always turn back to the original power. My mind will trick me into believing one more time that it would be okay for me to do that. So the charge, carry this message to other alcoholics. Now, what about the challenge? Because I won't leave that one hanging at all. And that's to practice the principles in all of my affairs. Now, I'll be honest with you. For many years, I didn't know how to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I learned how to go to work. I'd gotten a career. I was a pretty good guy. I wasn't going around beating and robbing and stealing and doing all of those things. But I was still living with deception. I was still living with a lot of lies. I was still running the show, wanting to dominate other people, to be in control, to be in charge. And that's just the way that I was living my life. So after I came back through this work in 2019, one of the things that I really began to discover was I had never made a daily practice of steps 10 and 11. And as I looked at that, at the way that that's outlined on page 84 of the book, and then whenever I look at from page 86 to 88, what the instructions look like for prayer and meditation, then I really began to get a new idea of how to practice the principles in all of my affairs. But in coming through the work, on page 19 of the book, and if you have your book, you can kind of bounce around with me because I'm going to bounce around some in that. I started getting an idea of how to do this in a way that I had never done it before. So, first full paragraph, page 19. None of us make a sole vocation of this work, and Justin and a few of you already know where I'm going with this. Nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. So we feel that the elimination of drinking or lusting or eating or gambling or whatever it may be, that's only the beginning. But a much more important demonstration of our principles lie before us in our respective homes. Number one, occupations, number two, and affairs, number three. And for me today, it is in that order. That is the challenge, is for me to practice the principles in all of my affairs, starting at home. Today, I have my lovely wife with me here today. Grateful to have her sitting in. For many years she wouldn't. There was a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of betrayal and a lot of trust that was broken. And by the grace of a loving God and what we do with this work, I was able to restore that. God restored my marriage. He healed my heart. He changed my heart. And today, I walk a recovered man. And so when I look at home, that's where I want to practice the principles moving forward first. I know when I first started doing that, is it was kind of to save face and kiss a little tail, but I can tell you as time went on, it's something I absolutely enjoyed doing. I got to where she was working at the time. I would go to her work every week. Whenever I would be home from work, I would grab her car, I'd run it down, I'd fill it up, I'd wash, clean it up, vacuum it out, bring it back, put it there in a parking lot without her even knowing it. And then I would come home. I was home earlier than her, so I would take care of dinner. I would do any kind of the things. And see, that's just something that I used to never really do. I never even thought about that. That wasn't my job, that was hers. But today, in practicing the principles in all of my affairs, I want her to know that she is the most important person in my life. My relationship with God is dependent upon my relationship with her. If I'm holding secrets from her, then I know that I'm starting to hold secrets from God. It's just kind of the way it works. So I told you that early on. I wanted to look at just a couple of paragraphs in the big book, and I want to do that from page 89. And I want us to start right there where it says practical experience. In other words, my lived experience. This is something that I have already done. It's practical. It's spiritual, but it's also practical. And that experience shows that nothing, and we mean absolutely nothing, will so much ensure immunity. And this is what I need. I need immunity. I need it from drinking. I need it from acting out. I need it from all of the things that seem to defeat me, the self, as intensive work with other alcoholics. And so up to this point in our book has talked to us about we, about us, about our, but now the book's going to begin to speak to me about you. In other words, this is something I have been through this work. I've done this with a sponsor up to this point. Now I'm going to step out of the nest. I'm going to trust a loving God, and I'm going to begin to carry this message to others. So 14 times on this page, the word you can be found. So it's not just going to meetings, it's intensive work. And we first seen that way back in Roman numeral there. I think it was in the forward to the second edition, and that was Roman numeral, what is that, 17 XVII. I'm not real good with Roman numerals, but it says there, it says it indicates that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Well, this is just a mirror of that one more time. Nothing is going to so much as ensure immunity from that as intensive work with others. Talking about intensive work when other activities fail. Have you ever got up in the morning and prayed, but you don't feel like you're connected? You went to a meeting, but you don't feel like you're connected. You've talked it out with somebody, but you still don't feel connected. But the moment you reach out and begin to try to help another alcoholic addict, something happens. We begin to get a connection. We begin to feel at ease, at peace. This is what it's telling me that I must do if I want immunity from that which is killing me. So the 12th suggestion, and remember that word suggestions, we don't have an alternative set of suggestions here. The suggestion that we're going to offer is a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's what will heal me. That's what will bring me into connection with God and put me in right relations with everybody I know. Now, there is one exception to that, and I think it is found there on uh, page 28 in our book. And if you bounce back there for just a second, um, 28, I said, yeah, anyway, it goes on to tell us that, we have one of two alternatives. And that's one is to go on to the bitter end and blot out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best that we can. And the other is to accept spiritual help. So die in step one, or accept help in step two. And it says, remember, there's that word, you can secure their confidence when others cannot. Our 12th suggestion is to carry this message. This message of a spiritual awakening is outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to other alcoholic addicts. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence. See, it's talking more and more and more about you. I can remember my very first spiritual experience was in a Native American sweat lodge here in Oklahoma. I live in Oklahoma here in the USA, and we practice a lot of Native American traditions. In fact, there was someone trying to kill me when I escaped down a mountain and ended up with a lot of full blood. That wasn't my first attempt to get sober, but that was the first time that it ever happened and continued to happen. Now, one of the things they did, they began to bring me into their ceremonial lodges. They began to teach me their ways. And one of those men were Alcoholics Anonymous, so I got the best of all worlds there. But the sweat is something that I continue to practice even to this day. And so it's a dome-like hut, and it's very dark on the inside, and you heat rocks on the outside for hours, and you bring those rocks in with a pitchfork, and you put them in a little hole, and you close it all up, and you use a bucket of water with a dipper, and you dip water onto the rocks, which creates a steam, and you begin to sweat, and you begin to pray, and you begin to meditate. And I was new; I didn't know anything about any of this. But the spiritual awakening that happened to me as a result of staying all the way through that's a very intense ceremony. It goes on for a couple of hours. And once I came out of that, I can remember just laying out in the woods, just petrified, from what had just happened. And I can just remember a peace and ease and comfort that came over me that told me everything was going to be okay. And in fact, it proved to be. The very next man I met was a man that was an alcoholic in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was very, very sharp in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He took me through the steps. I had a spiritual awakening as a result of it. There again, I didn't feel like some of the steps that I'd taken were solid in the way I wanted them to. He introduced me to Charlie of Joe and Charlie, and my life changed, and I never went back. I've been studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and passing that on to other people ever since. So, again, a lot of people will ask me, why do you have a lot of success with newcomers where others don't? And one of the things that I see, one, is people try to pick and choose what part of the books they want to go through instead of starting from the front and working to the back. They feel like, hey, I need to run this guy through the steps as fast as I can go. Now, that has worked for some people. I'm not going to say it isn't. I'm just saying that's not the way I do it. It's not the way it was done with me. But I had a guy in particular from San Diego a few years ago, and he would ask me, because he was having a lot of trouble. He had a lot of time sober, but he just couldn't, successfully take anybody through the steps. But what he was doing was he was waiting like a week at a time to talk to these people. Now, I understand that when you've been up through the steps or you've had somebody that's been around the program for a while. But when you're trying to sponsor a sex addict or somebody like that, you sure as hell can't wait a week in between before you try to get this guy to read something. And so what I did with him, I just, I'd taken this particular man back through the steps, and he had a new experience. And I began to show him how to sponsor others the way that we do it here. And so, once that I told him, don't wait a week. If they finish up with whatever you tell them to do or ask them to do, move right then. Don't wait. He said, well, that's how it was done with me. But what he didn't realize is, hell, he'd been sober about 10 years at that time. A lot of people don't get to make it that far. So, our book, back to page 89, it says life will take on new meaning. And that's one of the promises in our third step, to watch people recover, not only tell them how to recover, but to watch them recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about us, to have a host of friends. It's an experience that we must not miss. and we know that you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other, that is the bright spot of our lives. Now, I always thought going to meetings was just for me. That's all I ever thought. Why do you go to meetings, Dave? Well, I go to meetings so that I can stay sober and try to help other people. That's not what the book says. So when we read that part, that, frequent contact with newcomers is the bright spot of our lives. If we look back to page 15, and we're looking back into Bill's story here, he makes a very interesting statement. At the very bottom of the page, he says this: "We meet frequently so that newcomers, not old timers and a bunch of other people that have been around just looking for an aha moment or someone to tell us how wonderful the talk was we gave. We meet frequently so that the newcomers may find the fellowship they crave." And then also, if we turn back to page 159, the bottom of page 159, top of 160, it's going to tell us that same thing again. The bottom of 159, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object, in other words, our primary purpose, is to provide a time and a place where new people might bring their problems. So for me, this has been just a beautiful way of life to be able to do this with so many thousands and thousands and thousands of people through the years. Now, when Zoom came along right after COVID, I had never really done any online meetings. I had always done in person up to that point. Now, I'd got in some trouble in some in person meetings because of the behavior that I was practicing at the time. And so, Zoom and in person meetings for me was a very good thing. Now, 2019 is whenever I began my journey to heal from sex addiction, to begin to recover. And so, I was asked to speak at a couple of different places. People had heard me speak on a meeting. I was still pretty new to the fellowship. But I had a man approach me and he asked me, would I be willing to do a big book study with a group of people co-ed in Alaska and aim the book at lust and sexual acting out. Now, I'd never done that before. It had always been through alcoholism, AA. But anyway, I just let God take the lead with that, and it turned out to be a beautiful series. In a short time, I was asked to do it with a group of men in New Jersey, Orthodox Jews. Many of them began to recover. They started helping others to recover. They started helping others to recover. And then lastly, I was asked to do it with 7 different countries represented on a high road to a new freedom. Those tapes can be found on YouTube, and we break the entire big book down. I've also done that here at Rico 12 with Nikki M, a person I love dearly. I see you're on here, Nikki. I love you. I'm also doing the last chapters of the book every Monday morning with a lady named Lee W. from Connecticut. That series has just started, and the big book stays alive. I tell you all that to tell you this, is that nobody is too far down the scale to do what we do here. If you're suffering, then it's time to have a new experience. I know it was for me. I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I became a Christian in going through this work this last time. That's something I would have never said before, but it's something I absolutely stand by today. My experience is beautiful. I have a great career. As I said, my marriage has been healed. I have good relations with all my children. I'm a member in all fellowships today in good standings. And I just love my God more than I love anything or anyone. I love my God. I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to come here and to speak just a little bit with you guys here today. And it's always a pleasure to be in the company of my brother Justin. So thank you so much, Justin. I want to pass it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your share. I love working with you in these projects, and I'm grateful to have you as a mentor in my life. And Nikki often says, he doesn't even know it, but he's my sponsor. And I feel very similar to that with you, David. I appreciate all that you've shared with me as we've done this. A reminder to our live audience, it's now time for question and answer. If you have a question for David about anything he's spoken about here or Big Book or recovery related, please type it in the chat. If you would like to remain anonymous, if you don't want me to read your name, just direct message it to me in the chat or say anonymous, please, before typing the question in there. We're going to get to as many questions as we can over the next 25 minutes or so. So if you have one, please get in there. I'm going to start off with a question that I have. I love how you said, you look for the promise, the charge, and the challenge. And you laid those out pretty well here with step 12. David, would you mind jumping into one of the other steps? Another meaningful step that you look for the promise, the change. I'm sorry, the promise, the charge, and the challenge, and kind of delineate those in one of the other steps. Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I look at that in inventory as well in step 4. The promise is that it's not the man that I am that I'm writing about. That's not who I'm writing about at all. It's about the man that I have become based on a narrative that lives within. The promise is that I will see what the real problem is. And the problem is not alcohol, it's not resentment, it's not any of that. It is self. It's self manifested in various ways because before we even begin to write inventory, on page 64 of our book, it tells us this: being convinced that self manifests in various ways, not alcohol, not drugs, not boogers, not lust, not self. The promise is that I can and will recover from that. No longer will the same man that sat down to write that inventory be the same man that finishes writing that inventory. The charge of that is, a fact facing and a fearless moral inventory, and to face the facts. I have to search for them, and that's the searching. Uh, you know, a fact finding in order to find the facts. I have to do the work as outlined in the book, and then the moral is just the truth. And what is the truth? It's the truth about the lie that I am not the self. I am not this condition of mind that I have identified myself with. And so, that is the charge. The challenge for me is the fearless moral inventory. And again, the challenge there would be to discover the truth about the stock in trade. And if I want to discover the truth, what's the opposite of that? It's a lie. And so, the challenge is that I start out writing about hating you, and I'll be damned if it doesn't turn out that it's not you that I hate at all, it's me. And as a result, I get to heal in all those areas. No longer do I hate you. No longer do I hate me. The reason why is because I love God. Page 55 in the book says we found the great reality deep down within ourselves. And if that reality is deep down within me, then it's deep down within you. And if I hold you at a distance, I hold the power at a distance. If I let you in, I'll let this power in. And together we recover. In fact, if you look at my YouTube page, that would be the title: We Do Recover. So that is, for me, that's the promise, that's the charge, and that's the challenge of step 4. And that's with every step. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Yeah, thanks for walking through that. And maybe that's something I need to dive into deeper is find that promise, charge, and challenge of each step. And I'd never looked at it quite that way. Thank you for sharing that and inviting me to do that. David, next question comes from our live audience. In fact, it's from Nikki M. She says, "Thank you, David, for all you do. My question is, when your sponsee relapses, how do you direct them? I know work with another addict will save the day, so I tend to tell them to get back into sponsoring, but I'm not sure that's correct. Doing another set of steps is not always the answer, I have found. So, David, what are your thoughts on that? When a sponsee relapses, how do you direct them?"
Yeah, beautiful question from a beautiful person. Love you, Nikki M, so much. And I just had someone reach out to me with that very same question today. And so here's what I do. I don't try to put them back into any steps right away. I don't try to put them back into any of the reading of the book where we were at right away. One of the things that I want to do is get a corral around that beast, because if you look at the doctor's opinion, and I know you know this all too well, it says, it's imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he's approached, as then he has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. So for me, I want them to go to meetings. I want them to continue to check in with me daily. I want them to continue to talk with me about the selfishness, the dishonesty, the resentment and fear, and how that showed up in their life that day. I want some one-on-one time with them for probably about 10 days of going to meetings, a couple of meetings a day. Oh, I don't have time to do that day. Well, you don't have time not to do it. You had a good hour or two that you got to go hang out and play and have snacks and do what you do. Now, you got time to do this, or you can find somebody else. So what I do is put them into that for about 10 days. At that point, I will bring them back, recap all the way up, back up through the book to where we were at. I don't do the in-depth reading again, but I recap all the way back up, and then we pick up and we go with it again on a different basis, the basis of really, really diving in deep with God. And, that's worked with some it hasn't. So, you know, uh, but more often than not, I've had success with that. So I don't know if that answers the question, Miss Nikki, but that's my answer to it anyway. So thank you.
Thank you, David, for sharing that experience and hope there. Uh, you talked about with that relapse, you get them in, hey, where was the resentment, the selfishness, the dishonesty, the fear? That comes straight from the verbiage from the step 10. And you talked about starting with new prospects, pretty quick, starting on step 10 and 11, getting them connected to the root, I guess, the selfishness, self-centeredness, getting them connected pretty quickly to the power, to God in step 11. Talk to us a little bit about why that's the way you do things, and just a little bit behind that. I have also started doing that with my new sponsees, and I find it very helpful. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful practice that was used in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous with the first 100 members. They would do self examination, prayer, and meditation from day one. That's steps 10 and that's steps 11. And so the reason that I do that with people is because it's important to watch what's coming at you before it gets to you. You have a chance to turn away from it. Now, before, I would always look back after the action or the deed had already taken place and thought, oh my God, I wish I would have thought about that more closely. Or, oh my God, what was I thinking? Well, that practice encourages you to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear coming at you before it ever gets to you. And when you see that, the moment you see that coming, if you want to follow me along on page 84 of the big book, that's where the directions to it are laid out. And it says, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, and we add the word lust. Now, when these crop up, not if, when, so they are absolutely coming, be ready. Uh, we ask God at once to remove them. And so there's two set of instructions for me to do right away. As soon as I see the dishonesty, as soon as I see the lust, then I don't wait till I have to call my sponsor. I go to a meeting or no, right then I'm asking God to remove it. I discuss it with someone immediately, and you know how we do this. We send it through a text or through a WhatsApp group where there's about 30 or 40 of us men that 10 step all day long. Now, if it's something very serious and it's something that's about to take me out, then I'm not going to send a text. I'm going to pick up the phone and make a call. I'm going to discuss it with someone immediately, not after a while, not, when I get a chance, but right then I'm going to do that. And, it says make amends quickly, so we've seen at once, immediately, and quickly. It's telling me you better stay on top of this condition of mine or it's going to be all over you. And then the beautiful part of that is resolutely turning my thoughts to someone I can help. So really, there's only 5 things that's asking to do, and that's pretty simple for an addict. I know an addict like me, I need simplicity. So what it's asking me to do: 1 is watch, 2 ask, 3 discuss, 4 amend, 5 turn your thoughts. And if I can stay in that routine all day long, I promise you, I begin to have an emotional change. My recovery really starts to take on a new level. You don't have to have been around here for 30, 60, 90 days to begin that practice. Some people think that you do. I say bullshit. No, you don't, because I've worked with many, many, many men in the last 7 or 8 years, and I guarantee you that's where we begin every time. And there's just no days off on that. They start missing step 10s and 11s. We might have a conversation there once, maybe twice, but there won't be many more times after that, because I was told there are no days off on these 2 steps and there's no extra merits for doing them. You got to do them regardless. And, that's just been my experience. So thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, David. And as I've put this step 10 into practice, watching and going through this process, the more practice I get from it, the less amends I have to make, because I see the resentment coming before the words come out of my mouth. I see the dishonesty approaching before I lie, and it's such a cool thing to be able to take that process from, oh crap, I already did it, to, oh, I see it coming. I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask God to remove it and go through this process and find it. Have you found similar results from your practice of this?
Well, I absolutely have. And I tell you, it couldn't have come any quicker. At 25 years, and I'd been around here for a long time, and I knew the book very well. So it's not like, this was new verbiage to me. I already knew all of this. The problem was I wasn't practicing that, not the way it was outlined. And if you don't practice something, then, you don't get the results from it, or at least I didn't. I don't get step 10 by osmosis. I get it as a result of the work I do daily. And, I'm pretty tough on the guys that I work with and the guys that I sponsor in this area, because it's easy. One of the few times the book says it's going to be easy is they're on page 85, just the next page over. It's easy to let up on a spiritual program of action, which is steps 4 through 9. That's what brought the awakening to begin with. That's all step 10 is. And rest on our laurels. And one of the definitions for laurels is a past achievement. So if I've had some success and serenity and connection with God in the past, but I'm not feeling that now, it's probably because I've rested on the laurel at some point. And when I do that, there's trouble waiting on me. I may not drink and I may not act out, but I can promise you emotionally, I get into a lot of trouble emotionally just by not doing anything. Now, I tell my guys all the time, the same thing was told to me: David, the reason that you don't want to do this is because you're spiritually lazy. And that pissed me off. Don't talk to me like that. Me being spiritually lazy. But the truth is, it is. I don't want to take time to do evening review. I don't want to take time to do 2-way prayer. I don't want to, I want to blame everybody else for my trouble, yada, yada, whatever it is, But, I learned through this process that, there's only one guy that I need to take a look at, and that's me. And once I can do that, then I can show others through that, by my example, what a loving God has done in my life. And it's been a beautiful process. It really has. So.
Hey, Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform. with that. Thank you, David. One of the things that you brought up here, you were 25 years in the rooms, working a program pretty hard and pretty consistently, and yet you were still dying in the
Yeah.
rooms because of dishonesty. Um, to someone in here who may be in the rooms for years, maybe sober for years, but is still that restless, irritable, discontented, maybe still dishonest in some areas of their lives. What do you have to share for us there?
I know for myself that, I needed a new experience, although my pride wouldn't let me come and tell a lot of people that that I was really beginning to go back to sleep in Alcoholics Anonymous. And alcoholics and addicts, at least the ones that are like me, are pretty good liars. We can fake that and hide it for a good long while. But eventually, for me, it began to show up in different areas. But what I say, I have a lot of people that approach me. I speak at a lot of in-person conferences and weekend conferences and book studies, and they'll tell me, David, I'm dying from this, but I just can't go and talk about that the way you do. And I just encourage them by saying, brother, I wasn't able to do that either. I wasn't able to go talk to everybody in the room, but our book says that we must be willing to talk to someone, uh, get honest with someone. It doesn't say everyone, but it does say someone. So if you're struggling in the rooms, my experience, I don't like to say advice, but my experience is, if you don't get honest with someone, that trail is not going to get any lighter. It's only going to get heavier, and that walk becomes more dark, and we end up in places that we really never intended to go, with people that we never intended to be with. And so there's no shame in having a new experience. No shame. No, it doesn't matter how long you're sober. There's a difference between being sober and recovering from the disease of addiction and alcoholism. A big difference. So,
Mm. I love what you said there. There's no shame in having a new experience. And isn't that what step 11 is all about? I mean, we're going back a step here, but we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. And I think that the very process of that is having a new experience over and over again, seeking and seeing higher power from a different perspective. How do you go about that process of, I guess, improving and seeking that new experience that happens through these steps?
well, the one thing that I do on a daily basis is 10 and 11. And again, there are no days off on that. There are no extra merits for doing it. It's just, that I have to do it. But like you said, for so long, we will hear things in our fellowship or in the rooms that say, these are the maintenance steps of the program, 10, 11, 10, 11, just stay with the maintenance steps. But if you look at it very closely, that's absolutely not the truth. In fact, people like me die from shit like that. You know, uh, Step 10 doesn't say that we maintain anything. In fact, and we talked about it there just a few minutes ago. Continue, our next function is to grow, not maintain, grow in effectiveness and understanding. And then you just said it in step 11 too, is sought through prayer and meditation, not to maintain our conscious contact with God, but to improve. And how am I going to do that? Well, one, I'm gonna take a trip through the steps as outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I get to steps 10 and 11, if I got a sponsor that's going to hold me accountable there, then as long as I continue to watch, I discuss, or I ask, I discuss, I amend, and I turn my thoughts to someone I can help. I review in the evening, and on awakening, I take a look at what I'm to do through the day. For me, I've just learned to walk with God throughout the day. I listen to people that I wouldn't normally have listened to before. I mean, I'm more open now than I ever had been before. So, growing closer to the consciousness of God for me, one is studying the big book with somebody pretty much every day, if not with somebody on my own. The other is I've become a Bible reader, and I don't read it as often, but I can tell you that has become a very big part of my journey. And I love doing that because I see the 12 steps in the big book all over it. It's easy to break down just as it is with the big book. And I've learned how to do that. And it's just been a great experience. So, for me, the way that I continue to improve my conscious contact with God, and remember it says, as we understood him, is through a two-way prayer practice. Now, I don't always do it in the form of writing like I once did. You and I had shared some of those back and forth with each other for quite some time, actually. I still do that. I just don't do it in the form of writing. But I can read anything, no matter whether it's a big book, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the 12 and 12, or even just a damn Hallmark card with some kind of inspirational greeting on it, and really get into some kind of a prayer and then sit silently. And then the things that would come to me through my thoughts, I would jot them down somewhere where I could remember them. Then when the flow of those thoughts would stop, then I would take a few minutes. I would say a prayer. If nothing else came up, I would go back and start looking at those up against the four absolutes. What I wrote down, is this absolutely unselfish, uh, truthful, pure? And if it's not, then what I need to do is scratch that out. And whatever is left on that list really is God's will for me for that day. Now all I need is power to carry that out. And I do that through stepping out and helping others. And I begin to do that in a lot of ways that doesn't have anything to do with just addicts that are in the program. I know a lot of people that are struggling, out on the street or at my work. I'm able to offer encouraging words. I'm able to lead by example more than anything, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But that's how I improve my conscious contact with God. If you or other people aren't involved in that, then there's a pretty good chance that I'm not looking to improve. I'm just looking to maintain.
Mm.
That's my experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, David. One of the things that you read here on page 89 was life will take on a new meaning. And the next couple of phrases are really powerful to me. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you. You have to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. One of the greatest satisfactions in my life is watching my kids spread their wings and fly and go, grow up and become productive citizens. When I coached a lot of baseball, watching a player take the things that the principles that we taught and just really apply them and explode, and being a sponsor, the same thing. David, do you have any experiences that just without taking the anonymity away from anybody, that you just saw this happen in somebody's life that you worked with that really affected you positively?
Absolutely. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. A lot of them you've had on your podcast many times, and it's the people that I have sponsored through the years. When I came here in 2019, it was my first trip to an S fellowship, like SA is where I came to. Now, I had a lot of knowledge and a good working knowledge of the big book and the traditions and different things. And I seen that those guys were really struggling to understand the big book, and they didn't even know it really. And so I knew that, man, I couldn't help myself, but perhaps I could help some of them. And so I started sharing experience, strength, and hope. And then as time went on, of course, I got sober. I began to stay sober. And man, I started watching all these positive impacts. I've got one guy in Southeast Asia, absolutely a miracle, man. I watched this guy whenever I picked him up. Abortion is illegal in that country. He was going to pretty much a butcher in a back alley to have an abortion done on a lady that he had had an affair with. I mean, it could have exposed her all kinds of infection and different things, and he was just dying from this illness. And he had been sober 14 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I picked the guy up. We went through the process of the steps, and he emerged a new man. Man, he is one of the best members that I have. I send hundreds of guys his way to work through. I've watched this guy reunite his fellowship with his wife and with his son. And although he doesn't have them anymore, he has a good relationship. He has a good career today. He's living by the principles of recovery. There's another guy that's a cab driver over in New York. I was able to go to New York back in October with my lovely wife, and he took us all over the city in a cab. It's a great thing to sponsor a cabbie in New York City, trust me. And you know, I watched this man go from just so much resentment and so much, religious phoniness that he was living by to a man who was recovered by the steps. And then, of course, Dennis, I mean, I can't talk with it, and I'm not going to, break his name, but many of the people know Dennis. I picked him up. He had a lot of great big book recovery already. But what I've seen happen in that man's life is absolutely amazing. His relationship with God inspires me daily to really, really connect more and more and more and do what he does. And you, Justin, and Nikki, and my God, yeah, we could talk all day about that. But I've absolutely seen that happen. And but the good news is there's many, many more to come. So looking forward to it.
Hey, Rico 12 Spearheads. If our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Rico 12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at rico12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Rico 12 Spearhead. Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all those additional times of seeing that. It's like the pride of a father. Anytime a sponsee just spreads their wings and you just see that light come on and them building their own fellowship and going through all those different things that we just talked about, those promises there. David, before we wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, I don't know about wisdom. That's something that I pray for every day, wisdom and intellect. And I've learned that I have not because I ask not. So I do ask for that. But one of the things that I would say, if you're struggling, if you've been here for a while and you're struggling, you need a new experience. Don't let pride stop you from doing that. Just, oh, this will pass. I'll get over this. It's become my experience that, man, we have a fellowship here of brothers. We have a way out. Um, I love the connection that we all have. But I would say, just continue to do what we do and pass it along to others. That's the greatest miracle that we have. There's a story that I like to use sometimes, and it's a story in the Bible, and it's in the story of Hosea. And there's this donkey, and he's riding through town. He's got the Messiah on his back, and they're having a huge parade, and they're waving him down with palm leaves, and they're singing, and they're just having a hell of a party. And the whole time, this donkey, this mule, thinks all of this is for him. Don't be the donkey. You see, because what I've come to learn here is I'm not the message. I'm just the ass that gets to carry it. And I'm grateful I had a chance to do that here today on Rico 12. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, David. Sure appreciate you and all the service you do and the example you are to me. Keep at it, brother. All right. Thank you all for being here. If we missed your question or if you have other questions that you'd like to pose to David or to the WhatsApp Rico 12 WhatsApp community, join us there. In order to join that community, send me an email, rico12pod@gmail.com. I'll get you added. And just any questions or insights you have recovery wise, post them there and let's have a conversation in that community. If you haven't yet done so, please consider going to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's a powerful way to work Step 12 and getting this message out to more and more people that just like us who need to hear these types of speakers. Come back next week as we get back to our quote-unquote normal rotation of speakers. We finished up our 12-step series. Now we're going to move back to people who want to share on a recovery topic of their choice. And if you out there have a topic on your heart that you'd like to share, reach out to me. I'd love to get you set up. In fact, next week, the speaker I had lined up had to back out just last minute. So I am looking for a speaker for next week. So reach out to me, rico12pod@gmail.com. We'll get you set up. First come, first serve. If I get 3 or 4 or 5 more people that want to share, we'll get you lined up in the next month or two. All right, David, why don't you launch us out of here with the Lord's Prayer?
Absolutely, Justin. Again, thank you for your service. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's really good to be here with you. Moment of silence for those that are suffering in and out of the rooms. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, David. Everybody, there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. Stay. Come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake. For certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. For the needle to numb the pain inside, and the truth that he yearned for shriveled up and died. And all of his problems, all of his pain filled up the puddle, rose with the rain. The ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake. Just a fake, just a So he reached for a power to help him through. what lives in the darkness dies in the night. Yeah, what lives in the darkness dies.